I was up at Harvard a while back, and a very nice young guy picked me up at the airport, Harvard Business School attendee, and he said, look, he said, I went to undergrad here, and then I worked for X and Y and Z, and now I've come here. And he said, I thought it would really round up my resume perfectly if I went to work now for a big management consulting firm. And I said, well, is that what you want to do? And he said, no, but he said, that's the perfect resume. And I said, well, when are you going to start doing what you like? And he said, well, I'll get to that someday. And I said, well, I said, your plan sounds to me a lot like saving up sex for your old age. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, we look for three things when we hire people. We look for intelligence, we look for initiative or energy, and we look for integrity. And if they don't have the latter, the first two will kill you. Because if you're going to get somebody without integrity, you want them lazy and dumb. I mean, you don't want them smart and energetic. So it's that third quality, but everything about that quality is your choice. You can't change the way you are wired much, but you can change a lot of what you do with that wiring. And it's the habits that you generate now on those qualities, or those negative qualities. I mean, the person who always, claims credit for things they didn't do, that always cuts corners, that you can't count on. I mean, in the end, those are habit patterns. And the time to form the right habits is when you're your age. Someone once said the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. And I see that all the time. I see people with habit patterns that are self-destructive when they're 50 or 60, and they really can't change them. They're imprisoned by that. But you're not imprisoned by anything. So when you write down the qualities of that person that you'd like to buy 10% of, look at that list and ask yourself, is there anything on that list I couldn't do? And the answer is there won't be. And when you look at the person you sell short and you look at those qualities that you don't like, if you see any of those in yourself, egotism, whatever it may be, selfishness, you can get rid of that. I mean, that is not ordained. And if you follow that, and Ben Franklin did this, and my old boss Ben Graham did this at early ages in their young teens. Ben Graham looked around and he said, who do I admire? And he wanted to be admired himself, and he said, why do I admire these other people? And he said, if I admire them for these reasons, maybe other people will admire me if I behave in a similar manner. And he decided what kind of a person he wanted to be. And if you follow that, at the end, you'll be the person you want to buy 10% of. I mean, that's the goal in the end. And it's something that's achievable by everybody in this room. Defining your circle of competence is the most important aspect of investing. It's not how important, how large your circle is. You don't have to be an expert on everything. But knowing where the perimeter of that circle of what you know and what you don't know is, and staying inside of it, is all important. Tom Watson Sr., who started IBM, said in his book, he said, I'm no genius, he said, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. And that is the key. So if I understand a few things, and I stick in that arena, I'll do okay. And if I don't understand something, but I get all excited about it because my neighbors are talking about it, the stocks are going up and everything, I start fooling around someplace else, eventually I'll get creamed, and I should. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Now that isn't quite complete, because the question is, how sure are you that there are two in the bush, and how long do you have to wait to get them out? Now, he probably knew that, but he just didn't have time because he had all these other proverbs to write and had to get on with it. But he was halfway there in 600 BC. That's all there is to investing, is how many birds are in the bush, when are you going to get them out, and how sure are you? Now, if interest rates are 15%, roughly, you've got to get two birds out of the bush in 5 years to equal the bird in the hand. But if interest rates are 3%, and you can get two birds out in 20 years, it still makes sense to give up the bird in the hand, because it all gets back to discounting against an interest rate. Problem is, often you don't know, not only how many birds are in the bush, but in the case of the internet companies, there weren't any birds in the bush. But they still take the bird that you give them in the hand. But I actually have written about this sort of thing, and stealing heavily from Aesop, who wrote it some 2,600 years ago. But I've been behind on my reading. Yeah, I've made a lot of mistakes. Biggest mistake, well, not the biggest, necessarily the biggest, but buying Berkshire Hathaway itself was a mistake because Berkshire was a lousy textile business. And I bought it very cheap. I'd been taught by Ben Graham to buy things on a quantitative basis. Look around for things that are cheap. And that I was taught that, we'll say in 1949 or 50. It made a big impression on me. So I went around looking for what I call used cigar butts of stocks. And the cigar butt approach to buying stocks is that you walk down the street and you're looking around for cigar butts and you find this on the street, this terrible looking, soggy, ugly looking cigar, one puff left in it. But you pick it up and you get your one puff. Disgusting, you throw it away, but it's free. I mean, it's cheap. And then you look around for another soggy, one puff cigarette. Well, that's what I did for years. It's a mistake. Although you can make money doing it, but you can't make it with big money. It's so much easier just to buy wonderful businesses. So now I would rather buy a wonderful business at a fair price than a fair business at a wonderful price. But in those days, I was buying cheap stocks. And Berkshire was selling below its working capital per share. You got the plants for nothing. You got the machinery for nothing. You got the inventory and receivables at a discount. It was cheap. So I bought it. And 20 years later, I was still running a lousy business. And that money did not compound. You really want to be in a wonderful business because the time is the friend of the wonderful business. You keep compounding, it keeps doing more business, and you keep making more money. Time is the enemy of the lousy business. I could have sold Berkshire, perhaps liquidated it, and made a quick little profit, one puff. But staying with those kind of businesses is a big mistake. So you might say I learned something out of that mistake, and I would have been way better off taking what I did with Berkshire is I kept buying better businesses. I started an insurance business, See's Candy, the Buffalo, all kinds of things. I would have been way better doing that with a brand new little entity that I'd set up rather than using Berkshire as the platform. Now I've had a lot of fun out of it. I mean, everything in life seems to turn out for the better, so I don't have any complaints about that, but it was a dumb thing to do. But the biggest mistakes we've made by far, I've made, not we've made, biggest mistakes I've made by far are mistakes of omission and not commission. I mean, it's the things I knew enough to do, they were within my circle of competence, and I was sucking my thumb. And that is really, those are the ones that hurt. They don't show up anyplace. I probably cost Berkshire at least $5 billion, for example, by sucking my thumb 20 years ago or close to it when Fannie Mae was having some troubles, and we could have bought the whole company for practically nothing. And I don't worry about that if it's Microsoft because I don't know it. Because Microsoft isn't in my circle of competence. And so I don't have any reason to think I'm entitled to make money out of Microsoft or out of cocoa beans or whatever. But I did know enough to understand Fannie Mae, and I blew it. And that never shows up under conventional accounting. But I know the cost of it. I know. I passed it up. And those are the big, big mistakes. And I've had plenty of them. And unless I tell you about them in the annual report, and I resist the temptation sometimes, unless I tell you about them in the annual report, you're not going to know it because it doesn't show up under conventional accounting. But omission is way bigger than commission. There's big opportunities in life have to be seized. We don't do very many things, but when we get the chance to do something that's right and big, we've got to do it. And even to do it in a small scale is just as big a mistake almost as not doing it at all. I mean, you've really got to grab them when they come. Think for a minute, if you're going to get married, and you want a marriage that's going to last, not necessarily the happiest marriage, or one that Martha Stewart will talk about or anything, but you want a marriage that's going to last. What quality do you look for in a spouse? One quality. Do you look for brains? Do you look for humor? Do you look for character? Do you look for beauty? No. You look for low expectations. I mean, that is the marriage that's going to last. Both have low expectations. I mean, and I want my partners to be on the low side on expectations coming in because I want the marriage to last. It's a financial marriage when they join me at Berkshire, and I don't want them to think I'm going to do things that I'm not going to do. So that's our guiding principle. We have a business in Omaha, some of you may have heard of. It's the largest home furnishing store in the world. in Omaha, which only has a SMSA of 650,000 people. It's on 72 acres. It does $325 million in one location, which happens to be $500 for every man, woman, and child in the SMSA, but it draws from beyond that. That business comes about, or has resulted from an investment of $500 in 1937 by a woman who walked out of Russia in 1921. She walked out, got on a peanut boat, landed in Seattle with a tag around her neck. She couldn't speak one word of English. The American Red Cross looked at the tag. It said Fort Dodge, Iowa. They got her to Fort Dodge, Iowa. She couldn't pick up the language. She was there 2 years. She said she felt like a dummy. So she came to Omaha because there were other Russian Jews there, and she'd at least have somebody to talk to. Her little girl started school, Frances. Frances would come home at night and teach her mother the words she learned in school that day. That's how this woman, Rose Blumpkin, learned the English language, but from her daughter from kindergarten on, teaching her the words. She brought 7 siblings over from Russia, one at a time, $50 every time she saved $50. She sold used clothing and other works. She got her 7 siblings over, her mother and father, and by 1937, 16 years after she got here, she saved $500. She got on a train, went to Chicago, to the American Furniture Mart, which was this huge, impressive thing. She was smart as hell, but she thought like a peasant in a way, and she saw this building and she decided to name her company the Nebraska Furniture Mart. She went in and bought $500 worth of, she bought about $2,000 worth of merchandise. All the way back to Omaha, she worried because she thought, I owe $1,500, and she only had a $500 equity. So she got to Omaha. She took the bed, the sofa, the refrigerator out of her own home to sell fast so she could get the money so she could pay on time. She took that business and built it from that start. No one would sell to her. She went into court 4 times because the carpet manufacturers tried to keep her from selling at a discount, and she went into court and told the judge, because she figured out ways to buy this stuff in various nefarious ways from had other people buy it for her, and she said, look, I pay $3 a yard for this carpet. Brandeis sells it for $6.98. She says, I sell it for $3.98. Just tell me, Judge, how much you want me to rob people. She defended herself. Papers wrote it up. The judge bought carpet from her the next day. I mean, it was marvelous. Brandeis isn't selling anymore. They were the huge department store in Omaha. She put everybody out of business. And the punchline, she worked till she was 103. She sold me the business when she was 89. And she didn't have an audit. I went out to see her one afternoon. I took a check out with me because I knew she wanted to do something. And I said, Mrs. B, here's the money. I said, I don't need an audit. Just tell me whether you owe any money. She said, I've never owed any money since I owed those guys back in 1937. And she said, it's all free and clear. She'd never seen a balance sheet. She didn't know what accounting terms meant, but she understood the nature of the business. And I told her, I said, I'd rather have your word, than an audit from every one of the big 6 or big 8 or whatever there were, the number at the time of the top auditing firms. And she worked till she was 103. She died at 104. She had 3 siblings at her funeral. I mean, those are some genes. Her son works there now. He's 82 or 3, and the 3 sisters are all alive. But the punchline is, she couldn't read or write. This woman could not read or write. If you told her this room was 68 feet by 43, she would tell you how many square yards it was like that. She never went to school a day in her life. She would tell you how much that was at $5.98 a yard. She'd add the tax. She'd knock off something because she liked your looks. And that would be it. And that is that you can't beat that, and you can't replicate that at General Motors. You can't institutionalize that. The person who brings that kind of drive to a business and does it day after day and thinks about their customer, and that's all she did. She raised 4 kids in the process too, but you can't. It can't miss. And no, you don't have to worry if you're an entrepreneur. In most fields, there's some fields where you can't do it because there are scale aspects to it. But in most fields, you'll kill people. Bob Shaw did that with Shaw. Nobody ever heard of Shaw in carpet 30 years ago, and he's got 40% of the carpet business in the country. So it's a great field of opportunity out there.